Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today, whenever today may be. We're not doing any shopkeeping today or digging for lost loot. Instead, we're going to be focusing on something that I realized I should have led on for this channel. Today I want to establish generic phases in order to offer brevity when going over the many different card games I will be going through. I aim to have a lot of different variety on this channel, going through a ton of different games, and I know that you guys might not be as familiar with each and every one, since they're not going to be as popular or as known as some of the big ones out there. And having a shared framework to work from will help make going over all of these different games a lot easier. In addition, it will help to draw similarities between different games so that we can try to learn things from each one to help broaden our overall knowledge and honestly understand some research whenever trying to make overall conclusions about card games as a whole genre. You can see above me a little table of contents of the different things we'll be going over, starting with a little bit of the theory. So, in my time seeing and playing a variety of games, they often have many shared characteristics, and from my different experiences, I've been able to draw upon them in order to pick up new games more quickly. The aim in this video is to offer some of that ability to you who might not have as large of a gaming knowledge base to draw from or not as familiar with the type of genre. To start off with these different phases, I'm going to start with some of the big ones, and some of the most important ones, mainly being drawing and restoring resources. Drawing new cards is going to be the main way for any card game that you're going to go forward with your game plan. These are going to be the pieces that you're able to use, and being able to get access to new ones every turn is typically going to be important. I'm not saying that every card game will have this component, but it's something that a lot share, so I want to draw it here. In addition, restoring resources is going to be something. To play these cards, it's going to take some sort of resource that you're going to have to use, and you need to somehow get that resource back in order to be able to play more cards on future turns. For example, you could see restoring resources in Magic the Gathering, where you're untapping different lands that add mana to cast for spells. Or in Shadowverse, where you're going to be restoring play points in order to be able to play more spells. For examples of drawing cards, you could either be draw one card at the start of your turn, draw two cards at the end of your turn, in the middle of your opponent's turn, draw up to 5 cards. Any of those sort of different examples could be ways that you get access to new cards. So that's drawing and restoring your resources. Next up is what I'm going to be calling main phases. And the reason these are called main phases is it's the primary or main way that you're going to be deploying your cards. So this is where you have your variety of different actions. Typically you'll have many different things you're able to do. This could be anything from casting spells, summoning monsters, consuming items, calling on supporters, equipping armor. So it could be any of these sort of different things depending on what game you're playing. But this is where you're going to be doing the main amount or most of them possible. And honestly, for any sort of game, this is going to be where you think of it. And for some games, the next phase even bleeds into this. The next phase I'm going to go over is the battle phase, which could be, combat, battling, hacking your opponent, whatever it is. But I'm categorizing this by being the phase where you're going to have your cards that you played during your main phases primarily be interacting with your opponent at this point. Where you're going to try to get some sort of advantage over them, damage them, hurt their permanents, hurt their cards that they played, anything sort of like that. And for some games, the battle phase and main phases are more interwound, where you can do some main phase actions, do an attack, do some other main phase actions, do an attack. But for a lot of others, they're also separated. And then there is the end phase. That's going to be the end of your turn or the end of your opponent's turn, at which point it then passes to the next person to take their turn, and turns go back and forth. Certain things can also happen at this point. For example, in Magic the Gathering, damage is healed from everybody. You could have a maximum hand size, you have a discard down to that hand size. But this will be different things that happen based off of what the game is. The pure focus of it is that it is the turning point from your turn to your opponent's. The next phase I'm going over is more of a placeholder for things that a ton of different games might have. And I'm going to be calling it the standby phase. The reason for this standby phase is that it is a phase that exists in the turn order, but primarily for cards to take actions. For example, in Magic the Gathering, you're going to have a card that says, during your upkeep, do X, Y, or Z. Or during your opponent's upkeep, do this. In Yu-Gi-Oh, you have a literal standby phase where something might be during the third standby phase afterwards, destroy this card, or anything like that. It is a phase that primarily exists only for cards to reference it, and most of the time things don't really happen on its own. So you have the potential of, even though that phase exists, throughout the course of an entire game that you play with an opponent, that you guys never really reference it or really need to have it. These are currently all the phase building blocks that I see as being the most important to bring up. To show an example of how this might work into play, we'll call upon Magic the Gathering. The Magic the Gathering turn order is untap, upkeep, draw, main phase 1, combat phase, main phase 2, end phase. And we can see how this rough framework I worked out almost directly goes into this. Untap is going to be refreshing resources. Upkeep is going to be that sort of standby phase. Draw is going to be your draw phase. Main phase is a main phase. Combat phase will be one of these battle phases. Main phase 2 is another main phase. And then you have that end phase where stuff happens. Of course, this is simply a working framework for now and can be either expanded or changed based on how understandings of card games change with different times, or from feedback that you guys might have for me. I hope that this helps any of you trying to get a grasp of any new game out there or any of the games I'm going to be going over by breaking down the turn into these sort of different archetypal phases and combining them together in the order that they show in that game. If you want to be kept up to date on when this theory changes based off of either your suggestions or based off of other games that I come into knowledge of, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified. And if you also could you please leave me with a comment below on your thoughts of this overall sort of framework? Or, if you also have a variety of different games, which games do you think this framework just does not encompass, ones that I might have overlooked? How would you change the building blocks? Which ones would you add? Maybe which ones would you remove in order to get to more closely work in line with that? I'm really interested in seeing what you guys have to say. I'll be checking your comments below, and thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I wish you all well, and take care.